Hello, everyone, and welcome to this I Am Remarkable community event where we are celebrating Pride Month in conversation with Jordan Harrod. Give us a wave, Jordan.
Hello,
There
hello.
you go. Very excited to be speaking with you today. My name is Jazza John, and I am going to be your glamorous host. I have been a professional show off on the internet for over a decade and a half. I've got 2 podcasts and a YouTube channel, but my day job is as a user experience researcher at YouTube. But let's be honest, you're not here for me. I will let Jordan introduce herself shortly, but for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm going to tell you a little bit about IAmRemarkable, which is a global movement that empowers everyone, including underrepresented groups, to celebrate their achievements in the workplace and beyond, while challenging the social perception around self-promotion. To date, the program has reached over 500,000 participants across 180 countries through our I Am Remarkable workshop, which is open and available to anyone. So if you haven't taken a workshop already, check it out at the I Am Remarkable website. Through this session, we are here to celebrate and bring together the I Am Remarkable and LGBTQIA+ communities and educate ourselves on how to be better community members and allies to one another. Jordan and I are going to chat for about 40 minutes. Then you will all have the opportunity to ask her your burning questions. Well, I'll ask them on your behalf, if that makes sense. So please don't be shy and get those questions into the chat box on your screen, and we'll try and get to as many of them as possible. Jordan, hey, are you all right?
I am. I'm doing pretty good.
Awesome. How's your Pride Month?
It's been good. I wanted to go to the Pride Parade in Boston. It's the first one we've had in I think 3 years, partially due to COVID and partially due to apparently some conflict within the Boston Pride community 3 years ago.
Not some Pride drama. I mean,
Some Pride drama. But unfortunately, I was at my 5-year reunion, so I wasn't in town. But super excited to be hitting up all of the other Pride events in Boston this month.
Oh, 100%. Can you, I'm sure lots of people already know who you are, but can you give us the 411, the rundown on who you are? Give us some background. How's it like? What do you do?
Yeah, so I am a PhD candidate at a joint Harvard MIT program. I'm doing my PhD in medical engineering and medical physics, which is a long and broad PhD title, but basically I work on brain stimulation machine learning for healthcare applications. And so I'm a 5th year, which hopefully means that, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know it exists. Not there yet, but I have seen other people go into the light, and including people in my cohort this year. So I know that there's an exit, which is very nice. When I'm not doing my PhD, which is a lot of the time, I also run a YouTube channel that's focused on AI education. I started it about a month before I started my PhD in 2018, and it has grown far beyond my wildest dreams. And I've spread to Twitter and TikTok and Instagram, and now give talks and do workshops and stuff with people who are interested in improving their AI literacy, better understanding what AI means for them and their company. And then I just like playing with it on my own time to see where we are and how things are going.
What is it like being like in this space that obviously you've worked in for like at least the last 5 years, but I'm sure before that, like AI is at such an inflection point at the moment, and it is the tip of everybody's tongues. Not everybody who's talking about it really understands it, whereas you actually do. What's it like, kind of like having all of this swirl around you at the minute and genuinely being an expert in the space that is so like hot right now?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think on one hand, it's nice to see more public awareness about AI and more people playing with it and seeing like the very cool things that people are developing because they have just encountered these new technologies and they're using them to build things that, like, especially people I feel like in academia just wouldn't think about. On the other hand, I have had to delete Twitter from my phone because some of the AI discourse drives me a little bit batty. So I think it's definitely been cool to see more and more people, get interested in these technologies, and it's also definitely made me more interested in doing more science communication and engagement around these topics to make sure that the people who are interested in them know what's actually happening behind the scenes.
I feel like you have uh, the two kind of like areas that you are occupying as a PhD candidate and as a YouTube creator align really well with kind of like the goals of IAmRemarkable as a program. It's kind of like the ability to talk about your achievements in a way that is like that is unfiltered and genuine, and takes away a lot of that idea of imposter syndrome, of feeling like you don't belong in spaces. Um, you've chosen two career paths that kind of like require you to be really good at that self-promotion side of stuff. Um, was it a learning process? Are you one of those people who this comes really natural to, or what's it been like the last 5 years navigating both academia and kind of like building a social media like science communication persona online?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it came naturally to me necessarily. So when I started the channel, at the very least, I was uploading videos, but like I didn't tell anyone. I didn't like post on any of my socials. Like the idea of anyone that I knew seeing my videos was like my worst nightmare. It was just horrifying to me. So I was doing it because I did classroom science communication when I was an undergrad. I taught a class for I think 4th through 8th graders on how to engineer superpowers using biomedical engineering principles, and so we we had a lot of fun in that class. And when I got to grad school, I was interested in talking about kind of similar cool stuff, definitely incorporating more AI, but also reaching kind of a wider breadth of people. And I'm sure if anyone my age is watching, like we all grew up on Crash Course and things like that. And so YouTube seemed like a fun place to do that. But I definitely was super, super nervous about creating space for myself on the internet, I guess I would say, and taking up space on the internet and not wanting to step on anyone's toes or say the wrong thing initially. And so I think it has been a process of kind of easing further and further out of my comfort zone, where now like making videos is something that I like doing. I am also someone who likes streaming now, which is something that I think I don't know, I guess depending on your particular anxieties can be more or less anxiety provoking than long form video. I feel like for me, streaming was worse because you can't edit streams. You just
I
have to
feel
like
you.
talk and like hope you don't mess up.
Look at us right
But
now on a stream, guys.
yeah,
Leaps and bounds.
exactly. So I think over time I've definitely um, gotten more comfortable with it, gotten more comfortable promoting it, gotten um, prouder of it and happier to show it off to other people. And then when it comes to being on stage giving talks, that was also definitely something that I guess in the academic setting, I wouldn't say made me super uncomfortable. I think those types of presentations I've always been fine with, but more kind of industry keynote talks definitely were something that made me very nervous, and I've definitely gotten a lot more comfortable with them. I think it's just a process of doing it over and over and over again and learning, you know, a what you want to say, making sure the thing that you're saying on stage is actually the message that you want to deliver. Because I think that initially I probably catered to what I thought people wanted to hear, maybe more than the thing that I wanted to say. And now I have kind of leaned more towards the opposite. But also just being okay with like stumbling on stage and, having to get back up and turning it into something funny, like I did at a conference that I was recently at.
Can you tell me? I won't tell you about the time you bombed. Get you to tell us about the time you bombed. We don't have to talk about that. But I would love to know, do you now have an understanding of why you were nervous in those kinds of situations? And what beyond like like getting in reps, like doing practicing and doing it again and again and again, what else helped you to kind of like build up the resilience to then go up on stage and stuff to not go exactly how you planned, and for you to then kind of like riff on it and turn it into something positive, comedic, entertaining, or whatever?
Yeah, I think a lot of it for me came down to people pleasing. I think I, would go on stage and while trying to give these talks at the same time constantly be looking at the audience being like, oh, like they don't like XYZ, and like, oh, like this person doesn't seem super engaged and blah blah blah, and using that as my metric for like how well I was doing in the moment, which like wasn't necessarily a useful metric because like I can't read their minds and I don't actually know if, maybe they hate the talk. I don't know. But they also might have something else on their minds. Like they might have a work meeting after this. It's not, I don't know what's happening. And so using that as a feedback mechanism isn't necessarily useful. But then I at the same time, it wasn't about whether I was proud of what I did when I walked off the stage. It was about whether I made other people happy. And I think when I shifted away from that and shifted towards, walking off the stage. So the talk that I mentioned where I wouldn't say that I bombed. It certainly did not go according to plan, but I wouldn't say I bombed it. Was one where things very much did not go according to plan for like reasons having to do with technical difficulties. And I ended up just having fun with it, like leaning into kind of the comedy of the technical malfunctions and like things not going exactly the way that I'd planned them to, and my speaker notes like not actually showing up, and so me having to add a bunch of stuff. And that was a talk where when I got off the stage, I was kind of like, it seemed like people in the audience enjoyed it. That's cool. But like, I was really proud of that. I was really happy with that. I felt really good about that. And if everyone else hated it, then like, that's fine, because what really mattered to me in that moment was that I was happy.
And you were happy, and correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but you were happy because you were able to still thrive in that ambiguity, I guess, even with like the technical difficulties going on.
I think that, and also just be myself on stage, I suppose. I think that growing up, I wanted to be a million things, but a lot of the things that I enjoyed doing were about performance. One is sports. So there was a time when I thought that I was going to be a competitive athlete. There was a time that I thought that I was going to be like the front runner in a band or something like that. So I think at some point when I switched over to doing more science work, which I also love, I just didn't have as much experience being on stage in that way. And even in athletics was also, always very concerned about like, am I letting my team down? Am I letting my coaches down? Things like that. And so I think that once I was able to be able to walk on stage or walk into a competition or whatever it is and be like, yeah, I don't really care what these other people think. It was easier to be more myself on stage and not worry as much about whether or not every movement I'm making is exactly what all 700 people in the audience want, which is like a completely impossible goal anyway. And then it also let me like create talks that I enjoyed giving more, which was also helpful in terms of improving confidence on stage and things like that. And I guess I would say the other thing that has helped in a sense, and I don't want to recommend like leaning into this as something that builds your self-confidence, but the more that I've given those talks that I've been really proud of, where I've gone off stage like not totally sure whether the audience liked them, but very sure that I was happy with what I did, the more of those talks I've given, the more people ask me to give talks. So I must be doing something right. People like what I'm saying, and I like what I'm saying more, and so I feel like that's the right situation to be in.
And is that to give you a bit of a cliche question, because I feel like some of the stuff that you're describing comes with like age and experience and just kind of like being in these situations more and understanding your needs out of this more. Is there anything that you'd tell Jordan like 5 years ago that maybe would have sped up that realization? Like thinking about some of the people who maybe are going through similar kind of like obstacles at the moment, similar mental blocks in the work that they're doing, who might be watching?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a little bit, I guess, hard for me to give advice to 5 years ago me because there's a level in which, I think that the last 5 years needed to happen for me to be where I am now.
Mhm.
And like, maybe we didn't need like a 3-year pandemic in the middle of that. That would have been nice, but um that was not really advice that I think
Invest
I
in
could give
masks and
myself. Yeah.
vaccines. Yeah.
Get all your shots. No. So I think that but at the same time I do think that the going remote gave me a chance to give talks virtually, which then, you know, gave me ways of like inching up my confidence as opposed to like getting on stage being the first step.
Mm.
It would be more like give a talk to a bunch of people on Zoom and then give a talk to a smaller group but in person. Like I think things like that also help. So I think that if I could go back, I think the main piece of advice would just be to fail more, like to
Mm.
just try things and put it up and see what happens, and don't worry quite as much about um, whether or not it's perfect because like it's not gonna be. And for I guess YouTube specifically, like don't worry so much about what the comments are going to say because like a um well, A, you're just starting to upload, you're not gonna get that many comments or reviews, so, like, it's probably fine. But B, like, there will always be trolls in the comments, and there's not a ton you can do about that. So it's better to kinda like you mentioned earlier, get the reps in, to get a better sense of what formats you like and what things you like to talk about and things like that. And it's also a much I guess I think that's the only thing that I think would have sped up the journey is just, like, iterating through the failures a little bit quicker.
Mhm. Fail, like there's a phrase, right? Fail fast and fail often, or
Yeah.
something along those lines. I kind of want to go back to something you said around the carving out of your own space in YouTube and on your YouTube channel and your ability to do that. You've spoken in the past around kind of like why you maybe won't necessarily lend your voice to particular other spaces that are talking about similar topics that you talk about. Like there's you talked about some of the tone of the conversations around AI and generative AI that exist on platforms like Twitter and stuff like that. And it almost feels like YouTube is like this, not a bubble, but like a curated garden that you're
Mhm.
creating around like this topic that you get to set the tone on. How much of that is like what has that process been like in realizing that you're able to do that on YouTube, to create your own kind of like space to be able to have these conversations in the way that you want to?
Yeah, no, that's definitely been an interesting process because I feel like when I started the channel, it was by default kind of that space because I didn't
Mm,
have like an audience really, and so I could make whatever I wanted and I wasn't thinking as much about um, you know, analytics and the financial side of things and whether or not, this video will like do numbers or whatever.
mm,
And I think that as the channel and as creating content grew into an actual business that I had to start kind of planning for, business wise and financially and things like that. I do think I fell a little bit into the trap of like make things that people will watch regardless of whether or not you like them and like
mm,
what kind of space it will create for you. Um, and so I'd say probably sometime last year, I had to have a bit of a reckoning with myself around like, I don't like most of the content that I'm making. I'm not really enjoying making it. I don't really like the space that I've created here. Not that there's, anything. I don't think that the audience that I'd cultivated was like mean or anything like that. But it was a very technical audience. It was an audience that was really interested in like, how do I, learn to code XYZ thing, and how do I pass this interview question on like LeetCode and things like that. And that just wasn't really what I wanted to talk about. Those weren't the conversations that I wanted to have. Those weren't the people that I necessarily wanted to reach out to. And so I think over the last year, a lot of what I've been working on is like shifting over to, talking more about AI from a very like human first perspective, and trying to build an audience and create a space where those are the kinds of discussions that we have instead of like, here's a Google Colab link with a tutorial on like how to make a neural network or something like that. And so that's been, I think, really fun for me to see, what kinds of discussions happen when I make videos about different topics, and who do you see in the comments that's a little bit different than what you might see otherwise. And even, going back to like analytics, I'm less interested in things like, views in terms of like, did this video hit, I don't know, 10,000 views or whatever. But I am more interested in like, is the gender ratio on this video different? And what does that tell me about like who this topic is reaching and things like that. So I think that has been something that I have been trying to be a lot more intentional about in terms of curating this space.
What came? I'm curious how much having that information about your audience through something like YouTube Analytics or anything similar on other platforms, how much that made you aware of who you were reaching, and then maybe change the way that you framed and talked about and what you talked about and those kinds of things. Like, did you have a clear goal first, or was the fact that your analytics didn't line up with kind of like who you ended up retrospectively wanting to reach, did that change your approach to it?
I would say it's a little bit of both. I think that when I originally started the channel, I hadn't strongly considered what the demographic analytics would look like for certain videos. And then when I started making more videos, I noticed that I think a year or so into my channel, I think I was like 95% male according to analytics. And I think that in that period, I was really interested in shifting that ratio, but at the same time, I was trying to do it within the niche that I'd already kind of created for myself. So I was trying to do it while still making like tutorials and like deep dives into technical papers and things like that. And it's not purely a gender thing. I think the thing that I look at more is really the tone and the topics of discussion in the comments section. And whether it's like a bunch of people asking like questions that they can also put on Stack Overflow, or whether it's people having like interesting conversations. So I think that in realizing that I wanted to go more in the latter direction, I did start kind of intentionally changing my content to facilitate those kind of conversations. But I think when I started the channel, I was hoping to reach a wide and diverse audience in the same way that I reached a wide and diverse classroom audience. But I don't know that I knew enough about like YouTube to try to actually target anybody. And then I think as I spent more time making content, I had a better sense of like, oh, okay, like, if I want to reach XYZ audience, then like, or if I want to have XYZ types of discussions in the comments, then making a video that's like 95% like going through code and then like 5% talking about like real world impact is not actually going to do that. So we need to shift things.
The more you talk about it, the more I really like the garden metaphor that I came up with earlier, where it feels like you go into it maybe with like the rudimentary tools of being able to kind of like build this audience, but you are kind of you're seeing each year in the garden metaphor, you're seeing what works, what doesn't, and you're tweaking it as you go along. And I really kind of like that as a way of nurturing this space that you now end up having, and having like over 80,000 subscribers is clearly like no mean feat, and you're clearly resonating with an audience there, which is amazing to see. I am just going to, hello everybody watching, hi. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions for Jordan around Pride Month, around Gen AI, around building a YouTube channel, around being a PhD candidate, leave them in the Q&A function, and we will get to them towards the end of this talk. Jordan, back to you.
Yes.
You were talking about the real world impact of these technologies that you are so aware of because of the work that you do. And we were chatting, and actually one of the first videos I ever saw of yours was around Gen AI and or like AI and what are they called? Unrepresented characteristics, unobserved characteristics.
Yeah.
And specifically around, like, there was a load of buzz at the time, I remember, around like the TikTok algorithm knowing that you were bi before you were, and like all of that kind of stuff. And TikTok transed me, and all of those like ridiculous. I think TikTok knew I was non-binary before I did. But for you, that was a really interesting moment, you making that video, because it was kind of like it was a coming out video, one, for your audience, but also for kind of like your wider life, right?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I found a paper, or I believe I had done a video on like tech ethics books that you should read or something like that. And a lot of them focused on like racial bias and gender bias in AI systems. And somebody left a comment on that video that was basically like, do you have any recommendations on like the intersection of like AI and like the queer community? And I was like, that's actually pretty interesting, because I've read a bunch of these books, and that's really not something that I see a lot, that I saw a lot at the time. So I started doing some Googling and came across a paper whose name I definitely forgot. But it was something along the lines of unobserved characteristics in machine learning, and how that impacts specifically the queer community. And so the idea of the paper was that, in theory, obviously, you can look at a person and make a educated guess with lots of bias about their gender or their race, but you can't necessarily do the same as it relates to their sexuality. And so in making that video, I was making it in June. And
was that deliberate, or was it a coincidence?
I think it was a little bit of a coincidence. It was because like when I made a video and posted it on like Juneteenth, that was intentional. But I think in that case, the timing just happened to work out, where I was like, well, it's Pride Month and this video is about queer people, so
hey, may as well.
Sure. So I think in making that video, I very quickly realized that given that I talked in other videos about, both the technical side of how AI systems can be racially biased and how they have gender bias, and then kind of my lived experience as a person of color and as a woman in the world, and my thoughts on that, both kind of as a researcher, but also as like a human being who can and is affected by these systems. I very quickly realized in making the video that it would be really weird if I didn't mention I was pansexual, at the time bisexual, in the process of making the video, because I was making a video about queer people and unobserved characteristics, and like that is the literal the fact that people in my audience did not know that is like kind of the perfect example of why this matters and why it's important. So the I think intro to that video was something along the lines of like, you could guess that I am a woman, you could guess that I'm a person of color, but you wouldn't know that I'm bi if you looked at me. And then brought up also the TikTok algorithm thing, which I think my joke there was like, yeah, if the TikTok algorithm hadn't told me, or if I didn't already know, the TikTok algorithm certainly would have clued me in. And so I posted that video, and my audience certainly liked it. What I don't think I mentioned in that video was that I hadn't told my parents I was bi yet. And both of them are subscribed to my channel. And so
They get the bell notification, like it comes up.
yeah, well, it's not even in the title too. You like have to watch the video. So it was also a way of kind of forcing myself to have to call my parents basically immediately after to be like, hi. I just put up this video, and I think I have to tell you something before you watch it, because otherwise, well, I mean, if I don't, you're just going to call me up and be like, what? But yes, that was also, I came out to the internet in that video, which is not something that I was particularly worried about. But I did also kind of force myself to come out to my parents at the same time, which is something that I was a bit more worried about, but it went great. They were both totally fine with it. I wasn't expecting them to not be fine with it. And that's how I came out.
I'm glad. So I had a similar thing like forever ago now, where I came out to my audience because we were talking about gay marriage in the UK. It was like going through Parliament, and I was doing like political commentary videos at the time, and I was making this video about like this important bill that was going through Parliament. And I was like, it would just be really weird if I didn't just let people know. And then for me anyway, it kind of like unlocked the possibility, and I think it felt like I felt freer to be able to talk about stuff through a queer lens, to the point where that really became like the driving point of my channel. I know that you're not quite kind of like at the point where I was, where there were rainbow backgrounds on every single thumbnail, but has any of that kind of like that process of coming out, has that changed the way that you approach talking about those kinds of topics and the framing, or maybe the way that your audience interacts with you?
I would say it has made me more comfortable talking about, I guess, AI from that lens, because it was something that when I wasn't out, I felt weird about talking about, because, you know, I wasn't openly a part of the community, and so it felt a little disingenuous. I think that it also, I guess I would say, has made me kind of interested in why you don't see a lot of work at the intersection of like AI and being queer. I feel like that's something that, I don't know, given that you see a lot of work along other demographic lines, you don't see it there. And I just think that that's really interesting, and would love to see, you know, certainly more work that supports the queer community, but also more work coming out of the queer community. So if anyone has stuff that they think would be cool, like DM me on Instagram or something, because I'd love to see it. I think that in terms of my audience, I don't know that it's changed how my audience interacts with me very much. I think that anyone who would have had a problem with that probably left when I started talking about racism and AI. So I wasn't, super worried about alienating anyone at that point. And yeah, I think otherwise it's just, you know, as I have chosen to reveal more parts of myself to my audience, it makes me more comfortable talking about things from kind of a very multifaceted lens, whether it be talking about things as a woman, as a person of color, as a queer person, as a neurodivergent person. I think it allows me to add more nuance to conversations, which is something that I definitely think has improved my content.
I think that nuance is one of the things that makes you one of the science communicators who talk specifically about like AI and Gen AI the most interesting. Like when like everybody was paying like $3 to be able to get like 50 images of themselves generated in AI, and then you like broke down like how it made your skin tone different, and how it like changed your face shape and all of those kinds of things, and like the social implications of that. I think that kind of stuff is like really interesting in reframing it, rather than like, I think so many people still see this as like it's a cool fun thing, but the cool fun thing has like serious repercussions, and kind of like it's a rippling a stone being dropped in a pond that's now rippling. What are kind of around like AI in general, especially at the moment? I know that you have some concerns about it, and I'd love to hear those, but I'd also love to hear like what opportunities you think there are, like in the fields that you work in, but also specifically around being kind of like a creative online.
Yeah. I think in terms of, I mean, I guess in terms of things that I worry about, I feel like that goes back to like the fairness and bias discourse, which you can check out my channel. No, a lot of it
Comment,
just
subscribe. Thank you so
exactly.
much. 5 stars.
Smash that like button. No, I think that continues to be the thing that concerns me, as well as you know, people just using these systems without actually understanding what it is they do, and not I guess in particular integrating them into other systems in which their outputs are kind of taken without question and used for things. I feel like that's probably going to throw a lot of unintended harm out into the wider public as a result. In terms of things that I'm excited about, I mean, in healthcare, I think AI in healthcare is a very interesting field, I guess, because healthcare, I think, is uniquely challenging in a variety of ways, I suppose, both in terms of collecting data sets that are, you know, broadly representative, both in terms of the fact that, you know, if you look at the old IBM Watson Health attempts from, I think, like 4 years ago, where they basically only had training data from one region of the US, tried to use it in another region, and just turns out that the distribution of what cancers people have and things like that varies by region, because it varies by environmental factors and genetics and things like that. And so you can't just take this model and use it somewhere else. You need a broader data set, but then getting that data is really hard because of how healthcare data works in the US. I think that I'm hopeful that we get some systems that, you know, allow us to help people manage chronic illness, to help people manage mental health concerns, to, you know, prevent chronic illnesses before they can happen, things like that. But I'm also very curious to see, you know, what ends up being the thing that actually makes it into the clinic first, because getting things into the clinic in the first place is really, 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 really hard. Like, we didn't have electronic health records in the US until like the Center for Medicaid and Medicare basically paid hospitals to do it. And I feel like it's going to take something similar to get like AI really into the clinic, as well as being able to show that these systems actually work better than the current standard of care, which in a lot of cases they work comparable to it, which is like not enough for a hospital to try to adopt it. So I think it'll be really interesting, and I'm excited to see what happens on that front. In terms of creators, I think that I'm like about to put up a video about this actually.
Teaser, go subscribe everyone. I know we've done 2 call outs in like 2 minutes, but
I think that the thesis of the video is basically, you know, do creators need to be using Gen AI to stay relevant? And my answer is like A, no, and B, kind of it depends. I think that, you know, if it's a channel like mine, then like yes, because I talk about AI, so it'd be really weird if I just like didn't do that. But like if you run like a vlog channel, like I don't know, if it helps you be more creative, if it makes the editing process more efficient for you, then like go for it. If it's a useful tool, use it. Make sure you know what it actually does. Particularly, make sure you know whether you can use the data, like how the licensing works, because sometimes you can't use some of these things for commercial use and it's not clear, especially when it comes to images. So make sure you know that, because fair use is not set when it comes to generative AI. But if it's not, I'm broadly uninterested in like using AI for the sake of using AI. And so I think that there's plenty of ways to be creative without it. And I think that if it's a useful tool to help you be more creative, then like, cool, go for it.
No, thank you for that. I think sometimes it occasionally feels like it's reverse engineering the solution that it wants to fix,
Yeah.
right? But I think, I mean, if anybody wants to learn more about it, they should go and subscribe to Jordan Harrod on the internet.
Yeah.
I have one last question for you before we go into Q&A. And so for anybody watching, please do leave any questions in the chat box for Jordan, and I will ask them in the last few minutes. But just to kind of like bring it back to IAmRemarkable, and kind of like the mission of IAmRemarkable. So the success of the program is because of like all of the facilitators who come into workshops and run these workshops, and many of them are building a community and trying to connect with their participants long after they meet, after they have done one of these workshops. As somebody who themselves has successfully built their own online community, how have you gone about doing that beyond like the reverse engineering of the analytics that are available to you on YouTube? What advice would you give to any of these facilitators across the world who are not only trying to kind of like do the workshop, but then to build a community around it afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, there's the looking at analytics and things like that. There's also like something I do on Instagram a lot is like people like DM me stuff, and like just having conversations with people offline, like, or doing Q&As, things like that. I think that like meeting people one-to-one on like a very human level, and not necessarily worrying as much about like whether or not you've like properly made a thumbnail that will get the algorithm to send it to the right person, whatever, can be really important in terms of making people feel like they are actually part of the community. They're not just like, you know, another data point for you. I think that kind of along that line, like inviting feedback is another big one, like make people feel like their voices have been heard. And actually I used to have a series on the channel like very early on that was basically like, I can't remember what I actually called it now. I think it might have been called peer review. But the idea was that if I made a video and then somebody corrected me about something in the comments, I'd have a video like once a month that was basically like, here, let me go back and like, you know, highlight these people who corrected me and talk about like, you know, the thing that I got wrong or that was misleading or whatever it was, so that people could feel like, you know, I'm making content and I'm trying to help you understand something, but also like I am not an infallible person and like I will get things wrong, and I am open to that kind of criticism and feedback, and want it and actively invite it, and will like put you up on my channel as an example of like me wanting that. And so I think that finding ways to do that can also be helpful. I think the other thing that I would say is I feel like, I mean, I guess people still collaborate on YouTube, but like collaborating with people, collaborating with other groups, can be really nice. A lot of the time, you know, these people, I am not the only channel they're subscribed to on YouTube. They're subscribed to like other people who I may or may not also know. And so I think that there is something about, I don't know, at least for me, there's something about, you know, opening up the subpage and seeing that one of my favorite creators is doing a video with another one of my favorite creators, that like I see them together and I'm like, oh, I'm special because like I follow both of these people and I know all the inside
They
jokes
did
that both
it
these
for
people are
me.
making. Yeah. So I feel like stuff like that can also be really fun because I mean, it introduces you to a wider audience, which allows you to, you know, bring more people into the community. But I also feel like it creates a little bit of a like, we're special because like we know both of these people and a bunch of people watching this don't. So stuff like that I think is can be very fun.
Awesome. No, I love that as advice. That's really good, and kind of like finding your, as well as providing space for community, you're there finding community as well for yourself with like peers, as well as the people
Yeah.
that you're trying to help. And I think that's a really good message to have when you're trying to do that. So I'm now going to move to some of the questions that we have had submitted. So question one is, what advice would you give to somebody who is struggling with the idea of coming out to friends and family? And I'd love to hear this from you, Jordan, considering the unconventional manner in which you did so.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I'll start by saying that I think it does depend on why you are struggling with the idea of coming out. You know, if it's a safety thing, then like protect yourself first. Don't worry about anything else. But if it's, I guess, if you're just nervous about how they might take it, if you're worried about them seeing you differently, anything like that. First of all, I came out on the internet. I don't think anyone like has to come out publicly if that's not something that you're comfortable with. If, you know, all you want to do is go to like your best friend and the person that you trust the most and bring it up with them, maybe that's the first step. I don't think that you need to come out all in one shot to like the entire world. I think that it may be a gradual process. I mean, I joke about coming out on the internet, but for me, it was a gradual process. There were friends that I brought it up with, where I didn't necessarily come up to them and be like, "Hi, I'm not straight," but it was more of a like, "Yeah, I'm not. I don't think I am, but I'm not sure what I am." And over time, having more conversations, getting to a point where I could more comfortably be like, "Yeah, no, like I'm bi or I'm pan." I think took time, so I wouldn't rush the process. For you know, if you feel like you should be doing it faster, because everyone's on their own journey and everyone's, you know, doing this at their own pace, and I don't think that you need to speed up or slow down because you think the world thinks that you should be doing that. Um, I think the only other thing that I would say in terms of struggling with the idea, of coming out is people who, so I say this more as a person on the internet, like not everyone likes me. I'm okay with that. Not everyone's gonna like you. And I think that the friends who, at least for me, like my friends are super supportive. They've been through, you know, everything with me. They are the people that I lean on.
Mm.
And if those are the people that you have in your corner, like they'll still be there for you. They'll still support you and, you know, help you with this process and with any conflicts or anything that you're having, throughout, and whether or not what kind of people you like isn't going to change that. Also, if you have mental health concerns, see a mental health professional.
100%.
Yes.
I really like. I feel like that even though we joke about you coming out online, there is literally no way to come out to everybody and then like beyond like wearing a "I'm gay" pin. Like, there's not a huge amount that you can do in that way. There's this new thing that's been new to me that I've seen on like shorts and reels and TikTok. This idea of like, rather than coming out, you're inviting people in.
Hmm.
So it's on, like, you get to kind of like especially at the beginning,
Yeah.
slowly pick and choose who comes into that circle,
Yeah.
build that support network around you, whether it is friends, close family, maybe people who are not like in your immediate circle because you want to test the waters.
Yeah.
But I like that idea of thinking about inviting people in rather than you having to
Yeah.
go out.
Absolutely. Definitely. I totally agree with that.
Awesome. Question 2 from our chat. What advice would you give to allies who want to celebrate the LGBTQ plus community every day, not just during Pride Month?
Ooh. I mean, I definitely like the idea of every month being Pride Month, every day being Pride Day. I would say to ask your queer friends how they would like to be celebrated. I think that lots of well-meaning allies, end up centering themselves in moments like this when they are trying to support the LGBTQ plus community, because are trying to do so, but haven't actually like engaged with the community to see what the best way to do that is. So my kind of first and main piece of advice would be like, if you have queer friends, ask them what the best ways to support and celebrate the community would be for them. If there are community organizations in your town or your city, get involved and see what ways they would like to be supported. And I think that starting there will both help you make sure that you're doing things that are like actually supportive of the community in the first place. It'll also give you like a much more concrete idea of like what to do, so that if the concern is like, I want to do something to celebrate the queer community and I don't know what, like, go ask them. They'll tell you. They'll give you a list, and then you can just follow that list, and life is easier. So I think that those would be probably my two main pieces of advice. And then I think my only other one would just be to, normalize asking people what their pronouns are, like normalize um, things like that, normalize conversations that assume that everyone you meet is not straight by default. Like at this point, I usually don't assume that people are straight by default. I think that also the people I'm around, it's usually
We're in
a
pretty queer
50-50
spaces,
shot.
Jordan.
Yeah. So like I walk into a room and I'm like, I don't know. I assume that everybody likes everybody until proven otherwise. But I think that yeah, just normalizing the conversation can go a long way towards kind of almost circling back to the first question, making people who might feel uncomfortable with the idea of coming out or struggling to figure out whether or not the people around them will accept them. That can help people feel more comfortable with their own queer journeys.
I would love to add something to that around being an ally, because I think it's so important right now. Like in so many countries around the world, not least the one that we both live in, where
Yes.
it is a real inflection point, especially around, around LGBTQ plus rights in the United States, especially around trans access to healthcare and right to expression, all of those kinds of things. Something that has really brought me joy has been the slow and steady radicalization of people like Lizzo, who are leveraging their access to spaces, especially like majority white spaces in the South, where artists like Lizzo's music is incredibly popular, by expressing explicitly support for this community. And bringing that community into spaces where they wouldn't necessarily usually be present, to humanize them again. Because what is happening at the moment, it's something like 8% of Americans have ever met a trans person. And if you can, the more people who know us and the more people who know queer people, the better their support for our rights are.
Yes.
And so if you are an ally, you have that power to bring us into those spaces that only you have access to. Do that. And you'll make some people uncomfortable. Lizzo made a load of people uncomfortable when she brought out a load of drag queens onto a stage in Tennessee. But that's her explicitly showing support for that community was incredibly important.
Absolutely. No, I definitely agree with that. If you have, regardless of what kind of platform you have, whether it's, your 5 other friends or 1 million followers, you can bring queer people onto that platform, and it may make people in your audience and in your community uncomfortable. And I think that certainly, in most, whether or not you want to call this advocacy, learning to tolerate that discomfort is an important skill. And so I think that is definitely another, way to support the LGBTQ plus community, is to tolerate that discomfort. Because at the end of the day, the people in that community tolerate a lot more discomfort than you might.
Not that it's a competition, but we win.
Yes. And so, it shares the load.
I have one more question for you, and
Yes.
I adore this question that came in from the Q&A. Do you have a mentor who has helped you to kind of like navigate your way through academia and YouTube? Or is there like somebody who inspires you, who's gone before you, and you kind of like model yourself after?
My therapist. No. I mean, yeah, kind of. I think I have. I think I have a lot of mentors who I don't know have helped me navigate different aspects of my life. So I have people in academia who have been incredibly helpful in terms of just navigating like the hidden curriculum that is academia anyway, and also navigating doing a PhD. I think that um, you know people look at PhDs and think that the science is the hard part, and the science is certainly challenging. Um, but at least for me, a lot of the more challenging part has been like navigating like academic politics and like the interpersonal stuff and learning how to manage people and relationships and situations and projects, especially in a space in which like there's no HR, there's like no actual like hierarchy in terms of like a person that you directly report to and their boss and things like that. And learning to manage those kinds of situations can often be, I would say, equally as challenging as the science. So I've certainly had mentors that have helped me navigate those spaces and navigate issues. Um, I think in YouTube land, in social media land, I would say that I'm lucky that I fell into the friend group of like female STEM maker people. And so I think we all lean on each other, but they're also all people that I very much look up to because of both the amazing content that they make, but also like the behind the scenes support that they show to all of us, and the advice that they've given, and like the shoulders to cry on that they've been. They're all amazing. And then outside of that, yeah, I'd probably circle back to like my therapist and my business coach, who have been very helpful in I mean, therapist navigating my like brain, and then business coach navigating like, okay, so you have a YouTube channel and it's making money. Like, what now? how do you how do you turn this into a business? How do you deal with burnout? How do you deal with like, you know, creative block? How do you deal with um gaining pandemic weight and then people leaving comments about it and that creating anxiety? Like having people that I can go to for things like that, to navigate just the day to day of like, how do I make this into a business that has structure and um, keeps the business side going while still allowing me to like be creative and have fun with it and like not make it not fun.
100%. Not you giving all of the questions that I should have asked during this hour. Jordan, we have one more question that we ask all of our speakers who come onto IAmRemarkable, and it is unsurprisingly, what makes you remarkable?
Let's see. I think I'm remarkable because I'm able to hold a bunch of different perspectives at once. I think that it fits into almost every area of my life in terms of like research and coming from kind of a bunch of different disciplines and being able to use all of those different lenses to work on projects. I think it goes into content in terms of having a bunch of different perspectives on things like AI, and I think it comes into more for funsies, creative works. I was a choir kid growing up. I also used to do a lot of creative writing. I am back doing that now, and I'm working on a novel. It's taking a while, but being able to see things from a multitude of perspectives, both in terms of my lived experience, but also being able to step back and kind of put myself in other people's shoes for that at the same time. So I'd say that's how I'm remarkable.
And I would agree. I'm literally about to get kicked out of this meeting room, so I have to leave now.
Cool.
But thank you, Jordan, for joining us. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us and asking such engaging questions. This session is going to be available on demand, so catch up with that as and when you wish. Subscribe to Jordan and follow on everything.
Not a threat.
Bye. Do we wave?
I waved.